Hi, John Celestri, yeah, John the Animator Guy, and we're going to be talking about how to get started with your comic book idea. But first, I just want to let you know that if for those of you who don't know who I am, I animated Boba Fett in the Star Wars Holiday Special and other cartoon shows of the 1970s and 80s, and they included Filmation's He-Man, She-Ra, and Dragon's Lair, and Space Ace, and Rock and Rule, and even some Batman commercials. And I've got an Indiegogo campaign right now. We're halfway through, and I've turned my talents, and experience to creating new characters, my own characters, for a line of all ages comics, ages aimed at young kids, and between the ages of 12 and under 12 and 4 and 12. So I've got as I said, I'll have a link down in the descriptions, and we'll check it out. And we've got, as I said, another 14, 15 days left, and it's comics that will reawaken your inner child and kids that you have. Anyway, we're talking today with Luke Stone, and here we go. There he is.
Hey John, how's it going today?
It's going good. It's going great. Let me get some air here. Okay, good.
Yeah. I think it's funny when you said, in case you don't know who I am, I can't believe that anyone wouldn't know who John Celestri is. I mean, it's just the catalog of work that you've done over the years is just mind-boggling. How you've had the time to work on everything.
Well, it took a long time. It was one day after another.
So I do have one question for you, and I've been dying to ask this question.
Sure.
So you animated He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
Yeah.
So what was like that process? Now you don't, obviously you can't work you don't do that alone, right?
Oh no, there were 460 people at the studio.
Wow. So that just, because as an indie guy, I work all by myself. There's times I could do from start to finish with what I do, but right. There's no way that you could do an animation that way, I can imagine.
No, I did. So if you were working for the National Film Board of Canada, then you would create your own, and you do your own bit. You'd have a certain amount of money, and then you'd go and do your independent film. I mean, I have on my YouTube video channel, I have I did a 2.5 minute Snuffy and Zoe cartoon. I did that 4 or 5 years ago. It took me 2.5 years to complete on my own.
Wow.
Because 2 characters all going. I did everything. I did the music, I did all the layouts, the sound effects, did everything, coloring, the whole ball of wax. So doing it by yourself and doing it as traditional animation, which means sometimes you're doing 48 drawings for a second of a film, because you got 2 characters doing the same thing, and you're doing something that can't be on 2 frames exposures. So that gets into technical stuff. But anyway, but I prefer doing comic books because there's a faster turnaround, even if you're doing everything.
Yeah, definitely. So what exactly did you like? What was the thing that you had your hands on most of the time with that He-Man show?
Well, most of them were you get slotted to do some of the heavier personality scenes sometimes, or some physical stuff. So that's what would happen, is you'd go in and out, and but you had to do everything,
Wow.
So I mean, and you couldn't really be too far off the style, because we use a lot of stock footage, or use a library of movements and poses, and then re-expose them and whatnot, because you got to remember, everything was done under one roof, it was 400 people, 450 people, but also everything was done in the United States. And by that time, Hanna-Barbera was shipping the ink and paint and sometimes the assistant work overseas. But Lou Scheimer, who was running the studio and was an owner, but even after when they sold Filmation, he explicitly said everything had to be in Los Angeles, under the roof, on the same roof, and union benefits. So it was a union shop, So yeah, it was a great. Basically, he was the best boss I ever had.
I bet.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that show. I often people talk about my genesis moment in comics, and it was, being a 5-year-old watching that show, and then being introduced into comics, and seeing that this could happen in still, just single shot panels and stuff, and it just sparked a love for it.
Well, that's great, but He-Man, started off as basically a comic book. They were trying to do a comic book to go with the toys, with the action figure, and it was Lou Scheimer who came up with the idea of, why don't we do this as an animated film, animated series, and not just an animated 13 episodes a year, which you do once a week on Saturday morning. He said, let's do it as a syndicated show, 5 days a week for 13 weeks, and that's 65 shows, and that created a lot of work and employment. But Kenner, I guess it was either Kenner or Hasbro. I can't remember which one of the two toy manufacturers ran it, but that's how we did it. But listen, not just about me. What about yourself?
Yeah.
Tell me about your work and what you're doing. And I know we're pressed for time because you have other commitments to do. So let's go and say, what was your basic idea about doing your series, right?
I do a comic called Hybrids, the Sons of Gods, and the idea came, and I think that's probably the hardest part really for a comic, is finding an idea that really you can connect with, and that really speaks to you. I've got people all the time that come up with ideas, and you can kind of tell when they're passionate about it, when they're not. The idea came about 10, 11 years ago. I had been talking with had a pastor mentor friend of mine. We would get together after the youth group. I was being kind of mentored into youth ministry at the time. And so after all the kids had left and we were cleaning up and stuff, we would oftentimes have these conversations about weird things in the Bible. And one of the things that came up was in Genesis chapter 6, there was a story about these sons of gods or angels seeing the daughters of men, liking what they see, and starting to have babies with them. And these creatures are called the Nephilim, this angel-human hybrid. And so we would talk about that and then bring up how other major religions would have those kind of things, and how some of those strings might tie into Greek mythology, and some of those strings might tie into ancient aliens and pyramids and the city of Atlantis, and then Greek and Norse and Syrian mythologies and stuff like that, and how it all kind of just intertwines together. And as we would kind of, well, what about this? What do you think about this idea or that idea? And we would just kind of back and forth, almost kind of write this world in our heads just for fun. And he goes, Luke, you really like doing comic books, and you should make this a comic book. And based on his suggestion, I started to write things down and do a lot of research for this idea about kind of this idea of what would create superheroes and how it could potentially be realistic. So if the Nephilim really existed and they continued to have babies, then maybe you and I could have a little bit of that in us. And what if something happened where we, like those godlike abilities, reemerged somehow? And so, that was really kind of the inspiration.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what's interesting is you brought up a point where there were, you had Vikings and what it's what you're describing is the way that all people separated from each other still wind up going to the same idea that there are creatures that are more powerful
Yes.
than we are, and so therefore they have abilities, because we didn't make ourselves, so something there are all kinds of creation stories.
Yeah.
And and so therefore, the idea is you are looking for an answer for something, and so therefore you start trying to explain, an inexplicable thing, but you just saying, okay, Thor's hammer, the gods are, you don't understand where the thunder comes from, so there has to be someone who's angry.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So, but anyway, but it's interesting that is, everywhere has that kind of feeling of there are creatures that are uh, superhuman in some way, above
Yeah.
human.
It is funny that it is true in that sense. The like every culture lends some kind of a story to either beings or creatures or people that are somehow superhuman.
Hmm.
They're or paranormal. There's something greater, and I
Hmm.
think it comes down to the kind of this core value in us that we want to believe and think that there's something greater.
Hmm.
And we also, many of us, want to strive for something greater. We want to see greatness in us, I
Hmm.
think, and be able to achieve that kind of stuff. And I think that's really where, the stories of Superman and Batman, all of great um, these great stories. Luke Skywalker is just he's a moisture farmer,
Yeah.
and he has this aspiration, it's like Han Solo says, delusions of grandeur,
Yeah.
where he really feels like there's something bigger inside of him than where he's at. And I think
Yeah.
we all kind of have that in us inherently.
Oh,
And
yeah. I'm
yeah,
sure that meant, with any of the shows, any of the superheroes that we have, we're looking for somebody to come and help us.
yeah,
Sometimes, they say, well, I can't do this by myself because powers that are, I mean, that's basically what Superman is.
yeah.
I mean, that's, that is, it's just an interesting point of just where these kids got their idea, because with Schuster and was it Simon and Schuster, right? No, yeah, Simon and Schuster, Joe Simon, yeah, and Simon and Schuster. They were kids. They were pals in high school, and they were creating this stuff during high school and whatnot. They'd run back and forth with each other. I think they were in Cleveland, you know, and they came out with it. But this is, superhero comic books really come from that genesis, that character, that type of need that teenagers who are just starting into their adulthood, they're developing. They want to have powers. They want to do
Oh yeah.
something. So that there is that aspect.
Well, yeah, and you kind of also look at the time when Jack Kirby and Stan Lee were really creating some of these fantastic characters, and and some of these great stories. When you look back, when Superman and Batman came out, and even the Conan the Barbarian series, which was fantastic. It was at a time when a lot of people felt insignificant. They felt small.
Yeah. That's
And
that's a depression time. Those were depression, artists.
yeah, like right now, I think right now some of the original characters that I've seen people come up with, yours included, and some of these other people that I've met with their characters and the stories that they're developing, because people right now feel small, insignificant, or they feel trapped. They feel like they're helpless. It's really creating kind of a resurgence of that that kind of writing again and that kind of art again, I think.
Well, just to keep it in the theme of the of inspiration and perspiration, at what point, like, here we are, you said that you had an inspiration to start looking at this. Okay, now
Yeah.
you have, okay, so you have an idea, but now there's a germ of something. You can have all kinds of germs, but how do what was your approach? Or because you've done how many books, how many adventures of this so far?
I've done 5 books of this one so far, and I've done another half dozen or so other books that I've been a part of.
Hmm.
But this kind of my main story here, the hybrid story.
Right.
I've gotten through five issues in this arc, but those weren't the first issues of the book.
Okay.
I'd written some other issues of the book with some people that had claimed to be or wanted to try to be comic book writers, and they just didn't quite have the gift,
Hmm.
and I started doing some drawing and some art for some of those, and the stories just never seemed to really work.
What was
And
that? Okay, when it's your idea, okay, you come up with this idea. What were they missing?
I guess all the stuff that was in my head already.
Oh,
I was in this. The world became very complicated that I was trying to, because it has
yeah.
a string that ties from one conspiracy theory to another, and then it kind of humanizes all of these fantastic things a little bit, not too much, but just enough.
Mm.
And people would, like, whenever I would work with a writer and say, hey, okay, this is what I'm looking at, and I would sit down and try to explain the world, and they would get these other ideas and try to go off like, no, but you don't understand, like, this affects this and this affects that, and we're trying to tell the story of these people, but the world around them is doing it. It kind of messes everything up for them, and people just didn't get it. I tried to work with people, and finally I realized it was either a lost cause, that I would never make it, or that it was just something I was going to have to do on my own. And
Right.
so,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And so now that I've got big portions of the story told, I can start bringing in collaborators because they get where I'm going with it. We've laid some base for it,
Right.
and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it took about 10 years worth of research to get all the thoughts formulated about the world. And then it took another couple years, kind of at the end of that 10 years, because so like a little bit of overlap on trying to develop these characters and trying to give some background to it.
Interesting. So, in other words, you were trying to do the essence of what the world was like.
Yeah.
Okay, without having the characters in them.
Yes.
It's a formulating thing, because you have to say, okay, so and so does this, but there is an essence that you're talking about. These group of people affect these group of people. They form that group. They have
Exactly.
alliances. They do this and and then you're thinking about the society as a general aspect.
Yeah.
Then have to put together all of that before you start throwing characters into them and developing characters within that society, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I look at writing this way. There's 2 factors for me. There's the predictable and the unpredictable, the chaotic factors.
Okay.
And the predictable factors are the characters themselves. So when I create a character, I know how that character is going to respond to whatever comes into his or her sphere of influence, into their world. And I know how another character is going to respond. And so I can basically manipulate the story to go any way I want by bringing those characters in, being true to their voice and their responses, and putting the right characters in with the right characters to kind of manipulate the story to go where I want it to go. But there's also a thing that, and most readers can figure that out. We see that all the time in movies. When you see something happen in a movie and you're like, this is going to happen. Oh, they're going to get together at the end, or this is going to, you can read the predictable aspects of that character's personality once it's kind of revealed to you as the reader. Now, the thing that the reader can't predict is the world around them, because there's other characters that might come in and might disrupt the harmony that's there. There's world leaders, there's pandemics, there's all kinds of stuff that can come in and affect that. And so before I really started to develop the characters, I needed to have the world understood and have the mechanics of that world and kind of the rules of the world. How do people become heroes? Why do they have these powers? What caused these powers to take place? Because they're there, what other things behind the scenes are taking place that maybe we don't know about? You know, it can't just happen and surprise people, because obviously if it's just surprising people now, why did it wait now for this DNA to start doing it? There had to be some hints throughout history and some other things taking place. And so I had to kind of put all those elements in place. Whether I wrote them down in real depth or not, I still needed to know that those things were going to be in place, because that would affect the characters that we create to live in this world.
Yeah.
Know? So yeah,
that's a lot of hard. That's no longer, you know, you're inspired by the concept, but then as you go, you have to start saying, okay, I have this vision of this palace, this incredible palace, but there are thousands of rooms in it. So how does this, you know, you have to start thinking, okay, how do I build this thing?
Exactly. You have to go from a sketch on a paper to a blueprint at some point. You know, and then once you get the blueprint done, you've got to start moving bricks.
Right. Yeah.
And that's really kind of, you know, writing and doing a comic series and stuff, especially if you have big plans. Now, if it's like a little short, like, you know, 3 or 4 issue thing, you don't have as much to work with. But, you know, my plan was always to do at least 15 issues of this book over 3 arcs. I had 3 different parts of the story I wanted to tell. The main story, like the real piece of the story that I wanted to tell, was the 3rd arc, but no one's going to care about those characters if I just jump in there. So I had to write 2 other arcs. The one that is out now on Indiegogo, the Trash Day arc, and then the next arc that I'm drawing right now, it's called The Killing Field. And so that arc and this next arc are important in order for the 3rd arc, the story that I really want to tell, to matter to people. And so it's yeah.
Well, no, that's totally understood. So, I mean, in writing writing a novel or writing anything, you have to know what the backstory is. And like, you know, you don't start at the beginning. What happens, at least in just as a novel format, you know, today's reader is not looking for a slow, leisurely, you know, takeoff. You know, at least for, you know, in terms of certain kinds of action and, you know, certain types of genre. They want to know, okay, bang, what's the first page? I got to keep moving here. You know, keep it. You know, make me want to turn the page. So, but you still have to have written down and created the backstory, so that you know that you're dropping this person right at the beginning of the story that you're going to tell for this book. And, you know, there's a certain point where you can't do flashbacks. You know, you have to be able to say, okay, this person is, and show what his backstory is only through a few snippets here and there, but you have to have it built, correct?
Yeah. Exactly. And you know, I think that it also challenges the writing when you have a lot of backstory for these characters. I like to look at it this way: when you're trying to when a reader is getting to know a character, or even getting to know the world that they're involved in. So when we first meet, we're going to exchange names, the rule of reciprocity. I'm like, my name's Luke. My name's John. It's like, I draw comic books. Guess what? I draw comic books too. This, you know, we talk, well, what do you do for a living? This is what I do for a living. This is who I am. You know, like, what do you like? What sports teams do you like? Well, I like basketball and I like this team. You know, so you start to get in, but over time, as you start to maybe get together again, the next time John and I get together, we're going to share a little bit more about our personalities, what we're into, what we like, what we don't like. You know, you'll get to know that person over time. And so I don't just meet you and then get your whole backstory in a flashback.
Some places you do.
but I shouldn't.
You shouldn't.
I shouldn't. Yeah, I shouldn't. Now I could probably go to Wikipedia and look you up, you know, and get some of your backstory. But it's much more organic to meet someone, and then over time we get to peel away some of those layers of each other a little bit, so we get to know each other a little bit more, right? And so the trick is to try to do that in a 20 to 26 page or 28 page comic book.
Right.
You know, without doing editorializing stuff, without going, you know, doing flashback stuff, but just peel away the layers of a character over time. Like as the characters inside of the story get to know each other, the reader also gets to know those characters kind of at the same pace. And so,
and that's an important thing. I mean, it's what we just discussed is the first basic rule of writing in terms of, for fiction, just say, what's your tone? What's the world that you have? Know the what's going to happen, where they should be. What are the rules? Because the reader isn't going to know the rules. You can't make it up as you go along. You can, but many times it falls. There is a certain point where you go, "Oh my Lord, I don't
I
know.
messed up.
I've hit a wall. I just don't." Oh, and the series never goes anywhere after that.
And that's where
you know
that's where holes in the whole thing come in, and readers will call you on that. We see people do that on TV series and stuff like that. So
yeah.
My dog come and visit.
Oh.
Yeah. She's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm on a live stream talking with John.
Yeah.
So
a lot of times, I mean, I find myself, that's a reason. The failure of series are that at some point there's not enough there.
yeah.
You want to care what the characters are doing, and many you may have a story that you want to tell over, let's say, you say it's what, 20 to 26 pages per episode, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Or is it, are they
Issue.
all completed stories, each story, and then they move to the next one, or is a continued next issue?
It's a continue. Most of them are a continued next issue. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like even when they're within a trade paperback, that is going to launch into the next story too. So it gives us some direction into that. So
okay, so we're talking about 26 page. Let's say a maximum of 26 pages times 5, which is about 130 pages.
Yeah.
Okay, you have that, and that's your book 1, and then your book 2, and book 3. So you're basically looking at something that's about a 400 page.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's a lot of perspiration in that.
Yeah, and that perspiration. Yeah. Sometimes you're being intimidated, so there's intimidation there too, because because you're saying, how do you do that? But if you look at it, I mean, I don't know what are you looking at your overall arc? Have you got big sheets of paper where you say and graph everything that goes through to it? Because I've had ledger paper just to do a novel. I'd have ledger paper where I would have a timeline where all the various characters, when they come in, what they're doing, what's the time period. Because I would do historical crime fiction novels.
Oh wow!
And take that with putting in fictional characters that are intertwined with historical characters, and so therefore there has to be periods of time where you're taking actual elements and then saying, okay, how do they work into that, and how do they affect it without people knowing that they affected it, or the possibility that they affected it. So there would be a lot of timing. There's a line, and then say, okay, so and so is going on here, and then another sheet. So that way, before word 1 is written, something like that can be done for one novel. I mean, I don't know what your process is.
It's very similar. It's very similar. There's a lot of notes. Like I take big notes. It's like this is what I want to have. This is what I want, and I even do that when I outline my my story arcs.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like I think they call them writing beats, but it's like that.
Beats. Yeah. Well, usually beats would happen within a story itself. Okay. Beginning, middle, and end, and then you say, okay, this here. But usually in something what you're talking about, it's a huge. There are sections, and within the 26-page section that you have, they have their own beat.
Yes,
but then you have the arcs take care of the big chunks. Yep. Those are the arcs there, but the beats within those arcs you've got, because you have a beginning, middle, and end resolution that leads to the next thing.
Yes.
So
So it's So I use a kind of combination of those elements, but I'm a musician, so I understand rhythm,
right.
And so I try to create a rhythm in the story that is comfortable for the reader.
Right.
And then every once in a while I pull a jazz move and just like
Okay.
do something that no one's thinking. And that is what causes some tension or like, those memorable moments.
Right.
And so it's just, and I usually start with my ending, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
figure out what I want to do with the end. So with using hybrids as an example, I knew what I wanted to be the cause of the powers and how that was going to happen and who the antagonist was. I wanted his motivation to be very clear. Because I always feel the antagonist is probably the most important part of the story. And then what I wanted to do is I didn't want it to be a story just about superpowers.
Okay.
Like I wanted it to be something else. And so what happened was I had this idea. Human trafficking kind of became a big concern of mine. I got little kids and stuff like that, but that movie Taken was pretty intense. And but it kind of became an issue that I wanted people to recognize. And so I thought, well, let me use that as the tension for our heroes. And so what I did was I just figured, okay, well, people are going to start developing powers out of nowhere. Something's forcing the powers to be made to emerge out of people. But these people that develop the powers, they start to vanish. And we need someone to find out who's taking them, where they're taking them, and why they're taking them. And that's how the whole concept and story behind Hybrids, the Sons of Gods, developed.
Okay.
To where it's like we have this universe and here's what causes the powers, and we'll talk about that and explore that a bit. But more importantly than that, there's high stakes, people at risk, and these other people have to risk other things in order to be able to get them back. And so that's kind of where, and then you develop that. And so then that creates a whole other list of issues. Like, okay, well, why are they doing it? Who's doing it? And you've got to create all these motivations. Like, okay, well, if this is the motivation there, but why? You start pulling the little kid thing, when they go, but why? Why? I just trace the why all the way back to a single point where I could like, and then it's just because of that. Oh, okay. So as soon as I can get to that point in the answering my own questions on why we're doing this, then I can really start writing the story out.
Yeah. Do you find when you're doing your characters, okay, that each character has to perform a function, it has to fulfill a need within the storytelling, but the motivations? How many characters do you usually? I mean, we're not talking about. One of the big problems with so many animated series, and especially comic books today, there are so many characters.
Yeah.
You do not have time to get to know them, and because they're supposed to be all together or they're supposed to interact with each other all the time. I really like the days when there was one superhero per city. At least maybe two at the most, but they all had their own territory. You never, it was an odd thing for the Flash to be in Gotham City, or what have you. But
take care of his turf.
with your with the characters that you're doing, how many do you have? And
in this first arc, there's more, but as for main characters that you'll interact with, or there's 12 of them.
Okay, and the ones who are, are they teamed up as antagonists, or do they know each other, or don't they know each other yet?
A little bit of both. A little bit of, with that many characters, it's a little bit of everything in there. So it is difficult to really develop characters over 5 issues when you have that many. And so what I do is I focus on 1 or 2 at a time.
Okay.
And so we start out our story with this guy named Trashman, and he's kind of our everyman. We kind of get to see the story through his eyes. And so we get to know him a little bit. And so as we start to really develop who that character is, we get to see some of the bad guys, and we get to see some of their personality. And then the next issue, we get to see a little bit more of their personality. We develop them just a little bit at a time. but then we're now including two or three other people, and we're going to get just a little hint of what their personality is. And then we're going to open up another layer in the next issue so that you can see a little bit more now. And now we don't focus as much on Trash Man, because you've gotten a couple of chances to get to know kind of who he is and what his motivation is. And then we're going to focus on these other characters. And then we bring Trash Man back in and we develop his focus and motivation just a little bit more so that you're like, oh, I thought that's what he was. But now he's really confirming that that's the kind of person that he is, And so you do that back and forth. It's like a juggling thing, when you have the plates in the air spinning. Yep. That's what it is. You kind of go around spinning the plates, and for the reader to keep them kind of to the forefront. You try not to ignore anyone for too long. Right. But again, you're orchestrating a symphony, so you bring in the characters that are most important at that moment that people need to connect with.
Well, when you're doing your like say you have 26 pages, we'll do the maximum, okay?
Yeah.
You got 26 pages. You break them up to like say, okay, this here we can only do. We'll need 3 pages for that, 4 pages for that, 5 for that, and so on and so forth. And then it's well, we need a climax, or we need to bring it up to really ratchet it up, and then boom, we're gone for the next episode. The last page is always like that's that, last panel, what have you. Do you find sometimes you got too much story for what you thought you were going to do?
I did with my first issue. I needed to have it 20 pages so we can have a 24 self cover, and I had wrote too many pages, and it just wasn't going to work with the budget for the small studio I was with, and so we had to cut some pages, and so I had to rush the ending a little bit. I had to rewrite the ending and rush it. But I've got a new trick. So I know that I can go up to 28 pages. I want to leave it at about 26 for the cost of production, but it also leaves me a couple of pages for advertising, for other books and for other things that I'm doing. So I like to keep it around 26, between 20 and 26. So what I do is I start at 20. I'm like, okay, my goal is to write this out in 20 pages.
Okay.
And so I'll write a scene, and I'll try to pace it as best I can in as few pages as I can. And so I'll try to get to that 20 mark. And then I go to my editor and my editor will tell me whether or not a scene needs to be brought out more. And so I actually did that with this next issue, the one I'm drawing right now. We start out in one conversation, and I thought I'd covered it in one page. And so you go from one page, you turn the page, you're in a new scene. And she was like, that conversation seems really short to me. And there's a lot that's taken place kind of before, kind of off-screen stuff over the course of the last 6 months for these characters, and we need to at least touch on that a little bit. So that page went from one page to 3 pages. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this here: when as you're writing it, okay, that's one thing. You're visualizing it in your head. When you get down to thumbnailing it, or just at least blocking it out, laying it out, you find that the style of drawing is, needs more space to be breathed, to be able to be read. Because a lot of times, I know the one thing, like for example, in the old days of like golden, even the Silver Age, you'd have like 8 panels in a page and 9 panels a page, but there was a simplicity of artwork style that you could do that. You can play with that.
There was also narration in every panel. Yeah, there was also a narration in every panel that was basically describing what was happening inside of the box.
You don't need that anymore.
These days it's more show than tell. So show me, don't tell me. But there's, like the long dialogue conversations need more open space so that you can fit those dialogues in there and that you can flow it better. Whenever I get a script, or I see someone that's working on a script and they've got 7 panels and it's all like tons of dialogue, I'm like, that's not going to work. You need to bring that down to like 3 or 4 panels and be able to work in all of that back and forth, kind of in 1 panel or 2 panels, like that. Learn how to get a good letterer that can put that back and forth in there with each other. And
But
And then
sometimes,
definitely with action. Yeah.
yeah, sometimes you have to kill your little darlings, though. I mean, because a lot of it with animation or comic strip writing, you know, brevity was enough. I mean, you know, in the old comic book, the old cartoons, animation there was a minimum of dialogue. You didn't go and explain every little thing. You were showing.
Yeah.
You were
Yeah.
showing what was going on. The same way with you can. There is a difference between writing dialogue for novels and interior, depending upon what you're doing, and comic books. And I think that sometimes there is a lot of over dialogue just because you're trying to get across a certain style or a flair with, but everybody's wordy. So
Yeah.
therefore, the writer knows how to do. You know, they want to. I got to tell this. I don't want to just say, you know, a hundred horsemen come across the hill. I want to describe everything. I want to hear their dialogue. I want to be in the middle of it. And sometimes it's just too much.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think that, you know, if you can't get the point across in as few words as possible, that's what I think when an editor really comes in handy.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because you don't need to. You know, I did a lettering for a book that was. I mean, it. Oh, John, I've written collegiate papers that had less text than this comic book did.
Oh,
I mean, it was loaded with words and stuff. And I said, look, this right here, it was 2 paragraphs worth of dialogue. And I was like, I can make the point in 2 sentences.
Mm-hmm.
Like, seriously, and still use the character's voice.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
But
Well,
the writer was the writer was a screenwriter. And so he refused to make any of those changes. And so.
Well, who's paying him?
I don't know.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
They were paying me, so I did what he asked.
It wasn't your own project.
No.
Anything like that. No.
Yeah.
Jeez. Well, who you use? I mean, you know, do you self edit now, or do you have somebody else that sort of gives you a thumbs up, thumbs down? Or
Yeah,
what?
I never self edit because I'm too close to the project. I'll edit for other people, but I don't edit for myself. So I hire people to do that. So
Okay.
I bring them on board. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're getting close to the end here because I know you've got to leave and you've got to get going. So I promised this at 45 minutes, and we're just getting right to it. We got about another 2 or 3 minutes there. But is there anything that just give us a pitch for your crowdfunding, because you're coming to the end here. And
I am. It tells me how much time do I got? I'll have to hit the refresh button there. I got what?
You got 2 minutes here.
I got 2 minutes here. Yeah. So it tells me I got 7 hours left on this particular run of this book. So Hybrids, the Sons of Gods. I've got it up on Kickstarter, or not Kickstarter now, but Indiegogo now. It's a 128 pages, John, 128 pages that I've done of the story. And then it's got a bunch of extra stuff in there. So I've got some kind of the prologue stuff, story beyond the main story, so that people can get ready for the next arc. And then I've even put in some of the process of how I come up with certain ideas and certain aspects of the story inside of the book. And so that is running right now on Indiegogo. And so really we're just learning. This story tells us about a newly minted group of heroes that has to figure out how to live their new lives, while at the same time trying to take down this human trafficking ring. So it's pretty exciting. It ties in ancient aliens. It ties in old religious texts and lore. It ties in the pyramids and Atlantis and Greek mythology and Norse mythology and all that kind of stuff. So that's what it is. And if people are interested in it, they can go over to my website at lukestonestudios.com. And there's a link right at the top. They can click on that and get right to the Indiegogo, and they can check that out. So.
That's great. Anything else? What's your social media? People that you want besides going to your website?
Yeah. Well, if they go to the website, they can find my Twitter my Instagram, and my Facebook on there. So the website, I've made a one-stop shop for all things Luke Stone. So they can go to lukestonestudios.com. It's pretty easy to remember. And they can find all of the stuff they need to find there. They can even join my mailing list while they're there too. So
that's great. That's great. Well, listen, I want to have, we need to have more time to talk at some later date after you've had a chance to, you cool your jets after your campaign.
Get a chance to breathe. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to do that when you're running from one station to another, or one phase and one fire after another.
Yeah. What's funny is I actually had somebody say, Luke, you need to be on more streams. Like, I don't know how I could do that. Just not enough hours in the day.
Only so much, really. You just do what you can. That's all you can.
Absolutely. John, it's been such a pleasure talking to you today.
Yeah, it was great talking to you. And we've only really started talking in the last 2 months or what have you, something like that. So but anyway, it was a pleasure having you on, and I look forward to talking to you again. And right now, we're going to sign off. And once again, for me, I've got my Indiegogo campaign, John the Animator Comics. It's for kids between the ages of 4 and 12. Check it out. There's something for everybody. And once again, thank you for stopping by, and take care. So, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.